I, Sadaf Siddiqui, on behalf of this Department of English and Modern European Languages, take this privilege to extend a warm welcome to you all. We are also blessed to have amongst us our senior and retired professors, the visionaries and erudites who have contributed in making this department an intellectually rich place. A warm welcome to our dear luminaries. To ensure the multidimensional growth of the faculty members, research scholars and students, the department routinely organizes a number of academic activities. Earlier this year, the department organized a lecture by Professor Michael Michel from University of Warwick. And today, as a part of our extensive intellectual pursuits, we have scheduled a guest lecture by our eminent guest, Dr. Patrick Corbett, who is Assistant Professor at English Department and Professional and Technical Writing Program, New York City College of Technology, United States of America. Dr. Corbett will deliver his lecture on composing meaning for ourselves in the age of artificial intelligence. I now invite our esteemed guest, Dr. Corbett, to come to the dais and take his seat. So please. A big round of applause for Dr. Corbett. I now invite our head, Professor Sanjoy Saxena, to kindly come to the dais and take his seat. Sir. Now I request the convener of this program, Professor Jaya Kapoor, to present a bouquet and welcome our guest, Dr. Corbett. Welcome, sir. And now, I humbly request Head of the Department of English and Modern European Languages, Professor Saxena, to present a memento to our guest. Can we have a big round of applause? Thank you, sir. Moving on, I take this opportunity to invite our very dynamic, erudite Professor Prakash Joshi to come and deliver the lecture.
Thank you, Sadaf. I'm neither dynamic nor erudite, but thank you very much. So we are all gathered here to listen to Dr. Patrick Corbett, who teaches professional and technical writing at the New York City College of Technology, which is a constituent of the City University of New York. Dr. Corbett did his doctorate in rhetoric and composition at the University of Louisville, Kentucky, and his master's in English he did from the Caribbean University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Corbett is an author of book chapters in critical and academic books of significant importance. He has made presentations at several national, international conferences and seminars, and right now, perhaps this talk is a part of his ongoing research for a mega project he is working on, which will culminate in a book. So in a way, all of us, as many of us as I hear, are a part of that project. I mean, we get included in some way. Dr. Patrick is sitting right now in a hall of one of the oldest universities of India. He has flown to us from New York, which is one of the most, or perhaps the most, multinational and multicultural cities in the world, a city of confluences, for sure. And he has flown into one of the oldest cities of India, which in fact creates confluences of many kinds, cultural and of other types, apart from the confluence of rivers. So what an interesting journey for him, from one place, city of confluence, or confluences, to another of confluences. But that's not all. While talking to him yesterday, I learned that he spent a year, a day at Istanbul in Turkey, en route to Prayagraj, which is another city of significant confluences. So in fact, he has traveled to us from one city of confluences via another of significant confluences. I find it quite an interesting coincidence. We welcome you, Dr. Corbett. You're a fine person, sir, and I think within less than 24 years, within 24 hours of your being here, you have become a part of this departmental family, haven't you? Right. So the talk here is going to speak on composing meaning for ourselves in the age of artificial intelligence. The key phrase in this title is artificial intelligence, and the key word in the phrase is intelligence. So part of the problem is the definition of intelligence, how to define intelligence. Encyclopedia Britannica online defines intelligence as everything except the simplest human behavior. Quite a cryptic definition, looks very simplistic. But this definition creates a kind of dichotomy between intelligence on the one hand and behavior on the other. And before we start cudgeling our minds, the encyclopedia sort of solves the problem by citing the example of a female wasp that carries its food to its burrow and leaves the food at the entrance before taking it in. Then she goes in and checks if there are any intruders in the burrow, and when she finds none, she takes the food in. Now, looked from a distance, this looks quite an intelligent activity. But then the encyclopedia tells us that if you move the food away from the entrance while the wasp is inside the burrow, when she comes out and doesn't find the food there and finds the food a few centimeters or inches away, she repeats the entire procedure, carries the food 2 to 3 inches to the entrance, goes in, looks for the intruders, and then comes out and then again. So this is where the mystery sort of gets revealed to us. That is what encyclopedia says is instinctual behavior, not intelligence. So this is an interesting differentiation the encyclopedia creates between the two. We don't know what this artificial intelligence is, how intelligence can become artificial, but some people have been feeling, thinking, saying that this is the biggest thing happening to the human society, to the human world right now. and like Stuart Russell and Peter Norwig quote Kai-Fu Lee, who is an AI expert, to say that, quote, the impact of AI will be more than anything in the history of mankind. So, this is all I have to say in welcome of our erudite guest. And let us see what he has to say and tell us about artificial intelligence, Professor Corbett.
So before we invite Dr. Corbett to deliver his talk, let me quickly introduce him. Dr. Patrick Corbett is Assistant Professor at the Department of English and the Professional and Technical Writing Program at New York City College of Technology, United States of America. He has taught courses examining and teaching explicit knowledge creation processes, including language and thinking, information architecture, internship seminar, films from literature, advanced technical writing, and other technical communication courses. He has served as Grants Development Coordinator, Office of the Associate Provost, Liberal Arts and Sciences Program Review Chair, Office of the Dean of Arts and Sciences, Internship Coordinator, Professional and Technical Writing Program. He has presented papers in international and national conferences, published book chapters, and has been spreaded several research papers published in international journals of repute. Currently, sir is on sabbatical. After his return from his sabbatical in 2024, he will serve as the director of the college's Professional and Technical Writing Program. The list is quite long, so without much ado, I would like to humbly invite our guest, Dr. Corbett, to come and deliver his talk.
Swagatai, welcome, thank you. While they get the presentation restarted, I really want to take a moment to thank a couple of people. It was the work of a lot of people to bring me here, and I owe a debt of gratitude to all of you. But I have to first thank Professor Jay for she was the one who made it possible for me to come visit you today. And I have to offer a very special thanks to my friend and collaborator, Dr. Nakul, who has championed me and my work in India with relentless vigor. So on behalf of myself, the Department of English of the New York City College of Technology, I have a little gift. Has to share this gift with his entire department. But once they discover what it is, I'm sure they're going to let him do the work. Okay, so before I begin, I want to tell you, yes, this talk is 100% my own, in as much as any academic scholarship can be one's own, generated from my current book project. But the presentation itself is generated procedurally, meaning I used AI to design it all. So that is a first for me, but I decided if I was going to come here to talk about AI as a subject, I really wanted to understand the realities of working with it in practice rather than just talking about it in theory. So here we go. Let's start a bit by talking about where AI will take us as a field. Exploring the essence of subjective meaning and how it's composed is fundamental to the humanities. Studying how we make meaning is not just something taught in humanities-based courses, but part of how we define the work itself. This is the case because humanities focus on cultural production, particularly through the creation, circulation, and reception of its artifacts, like books. So of course, artificial intelligence, AI for short, is immensely interesting to humanists, despite it being a mechanistic subject. AI is not just an artifact of culture, but also a means of producing it, and one that potentially affords heretofore difficult to imagine capacities and challenges for symbolic communication. Now, before I go on, you all can understand me speaking like this? Yes? Okay. Not if I say really fast on a little dialect, but right. The humanities are a natural place, then, to take up the challenge of exploring the influence of AI. AI provides us with a new order of tools to interact with and create meaning. Anyone with an internet connection and a few dollars in their pocket can use AI to produce coherent, cohesive, and developed chunks of pre-organized content in multiple modalities and across multiple media. They can control the input and output parameters of production with better than modest precision, and they can do that without any training and virtually no practice. Until very recently, this was impossible. Creating software that mimicked some human-like ability was an expertise-intensive and expensive proposition that was only found in research labs. Now, it's an out-of-the-box solution available everywhere. Now, unlike automation tools, which I'll also talk about, which we rely on in some degree to do all of our work, we all use automation, even just if it's for sorting emails or digital files. AI engines don't just produce information. They mimic the building of conceptual meaning, and they're getting really good at it. AI is the evolution of the symbolic machine. And the symbolic machine is a class of digital information tool that's capable of operating independently of one-to-one input and output. Conceptually, AI functions by ingesting various corpora, the plural of corpus, bodies of information. They ingest various corpora of symbolic artifacts, and then they organize and output different algorithmically determined symbolic artifacts. These resultant artifacts are not predictable based on our inputs. To capture that phenomenon, we say these artifacts are emergent. You know what, it might actually just be easier if we go to someone manually advancing the slides. Do you think that's a good idea? Okay, I'll just let you know. Thank you. Creating emergent meaning through symbolic machines raises natural questions. And these questions range from the simple to the esoteric. How do we use AI to create meaning? Is the meaning created by AI equivalent to the meaning created by a person? If two machines are sharing meaning created by a third machine, do we even call it meaning by any human measure? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? These are the kinds of questions that humanists do really well with because we insist on exploring the human subject and human activity with complexity. We are driven to look beyond the information, beyond the data, to the manifest impact of these phenomena on the individual, on the collective, and on culture more generally. The humanities reminds us that no matter what we are discussing, our discussions rest within the realm of human endeavor. And the advent of AI reminds us that humanistic perspectives are just as important to innovation and inspiration as good engineering practice and science. Studying the humanities, the humanities reminds us that no matter what we are discussing, our discussions rest within the realm of human endeavor. And the advent of AI reminds us that humanistic perspectives are just as important. Just as important as good engineering and practice of science. So studying the humanities encourages one to think about the contours and the possibilities of this experience. Insofar as that experience intersects with and is influenced by AI, we should all, as humanists, have something really interesting to say. We're getting it worked out. I believe that the humanities helps us forge and appreciate our connection to the human world. The humanities also reminds us that we occupy this world with others, with whom we share both similarities and differences, and those similarities and differences can be profound. We must pursue a humanistic understanding of AI for the good of all. And this is not a utopian statement. It is a very practical one. If we eliminate a humanistic understanding of technologies like AI, or whatever surprises us next, if we rely on purely functional and absolutist frameworks to understand these machines, we do so at our own peril, because it's not us who benefits from this lack of nuanced consideration. There is a reason we have grown dependent, and perhaps complacently so, on the instruments we use to create and share meaning. We don't often consider these reasons that we use them, but our desire for choice, agency, and freedom remain at the core of exploring individual subjectivity. And the antithesis of these values, coercion, rigidity, even tyranny, seem to be waiting at our doorstep if we fail to account for and respond to the ideology and purposeful design that goes into the deployment of these tools that we use. Let me explain why I'm suspicious. I'm passionate, as I've said, about the role of humanities in society and in education, but these are roles that I often have to explain, even defend, because my typical collaborator is as likely to be an astrophysicist, a robotics engineer, or a computational biologist using AI to solve problems in medicine as it is like-minded colleagues here in the humanities. This is due to me being tenured in an English department in a college of technology. We call ourselves City Tech. We are the dedicated undergraduate STEM unit of the City University of New York, CUNY, the leading urban university in the United States. CUNY is the principal economic and social ladder out of poverty for 55,000 students a year through their degrees that they take with them. City Tech's key value proposition within CUNY is our deeply multidisciplinary ethos and our ability to integrate that into our institutional strategy. We do this because we understand that studying the humanities contributes both depth and breadth to all modalities of thinking. The humanities encourages one to think dynamically, developing and shifting between conceptual frames of reference. And by pairing the humanities with STEM, we create opportunities for fluency in multiple symbolic systems that allow graduates to organize ideas into very robust frameworks of knowledge. And just as importantly, we give our students the awareness that humanities machines do not exist with neutral value in an ideological vacuum. Can you tell I've written a lot of grants? That's all grant language. Slide. I'm telling you this because as a humanist in a STEM institution, that is what I do. It is my vocation. I help people make meaning from the raw materials of their experience, no matter what these experiences are or where people may find them. And part of that is encouraging people to reflect deeply on the tools that they use to do the work of the world. Of course, my STEM colleagues sometimes need gentle reminders that I'm not just teaching students to interpret a film or format a presentation or write an essay on some piece of not yet forgotten literature. Students, though, have already found that AI can do these tasks in under a minute. What I'm doing when I work with students is show them how to develop perspective that furthers their evolution as a thinker and an educated citizen of the world. While AI may contribute to this endeavor, no AI, present or on the horizon, can do that work for them, or for me. CityTech is an intensely multicultural environment. I have personally taught students from more than 100 countries, and it only took me 4 years to reach that milestone, at which point I stopped counting. Learning to compose meaning and communicate across a mosaic of cultures in a global environment is a challenge that AI is not up to. But we are. In a STEM environment, the humanities train students to see and communicate perspectives and possibilities that would be impossible through their technical training alone. The humanities helps students develop and orient themselves as individuals, solving problems in a complex and messy world because our understanding of this world is inseparable from human endeavor. As such, the humanities are invaluable to the business of discovery and innovation. But they're still very difficult to fund because much of what the humanities contributes is seen as optional or irrelevant, or more commonly, in my experience, it's just invisible. Students come to CityTech because they see science and technology, not the humanities, as pathways to success. Their excellent corporate placements prove them to be initially correct, but once they're immersed in their professions, once they hit the workforce and the world's problems come to them to be solved, they grow to realize that they need a diversity of perspectives delivered through a humanities education because it deepens their understanding of both the best and the worst of the human world. It shows us how brilliant and beautiful humanity is, while at the same time providing an ideological check on our darker nature by not letting it operate unseen. It shines light on the darkness. Slide. It's okay. I work at a college called the College of Technology, and we have these exact same issues. In fact, we have a nickname for it that I'm not going to share publicly. So why am I telling you all of this? It's really not to serve my own ego. Trust me, my ego will be fine. But to make a very, very emphatic point about my work. And that is 80% of my work is dreadfully boring. It just is. I don't like to do it. No one, in fact, likes to do it. That's why they shuffled it off onto me. But the other 20%, it's great. I live for that 20%, and I will move the mountains or fly to India to get it. The rest, I wouldn't do it if I didn't have to. It's hard, it's repetitive, it's time-consuming, so I automate it. Or, if I'm lucky, someone else has automated it before me, and I can steal their tools and incorporate it into my own work. Part of innovation is stealing. No, wait, back up. Part of innovation is using the tools and processes afforded by technology to do the parts we don't really want to do or can't do ourselves, or that we can do better with well-constructed machines. If you think about it, if you really think about it, this fundamentally changes the nuts and bolts activities of practice. It changes the processes of how we create meaning. It changes how we think about meaning and the tools, and it changes the meaning that we create. I can tell you that 5 years ago, I would have used PowerPoint and Word to create this presentation. I barely use either product anymore. Here, I've used Google Docs, Zotero, Canva, Facebook Messenger, Bing AI, Chrome AI, GPT, Gamma, Midjourney, LinkedIn, Adobe Color Palette, and other tools, each significantly for ideation, organization, design, image generation, idea parsing, argumentation, fact-checking, and other tasks that we normally don't think about. These tools have changed the focus of my attention and the activities to which I have devoted my time doing this humanities project that I've brought to you today. Can we go to slide 14? There we go. Division of labor and automation have been with us long before digital technology, even before electricity. But it is in the age of the late digital machine that we experience the power of symbolic machines, where I can use these tools to enhance my capacity to locate, to store, to retrieve, manipulate, and communicate information through connected and continuously evolving systems, where I take my existing knowledge and augment it quickly and easily with my physical library, my digital library, a cadre of expert peers available through social media almost on command, and my previous works. Now with AI, I can compare my own emergent ideas to the emergent ideas of various AI tools. I can conceptually or logically structure and restructure these ideas, expand upon them, and rework them into a presentation that I simply could never have accomplished with the tools I used even 2 years ago. Automation is everywhere. And that just brings to mind that we placed a student in a company called Automation Everywhere. We have created tools of symbol storing, symbol manipulating, and symbol creating machines. They do the boring and the difficult tasks for us. I've appropriated this term symbolic machine, right? It's not mine. I did not come up with it. The person who came up with it was a Danish semiotician whose name was Karage Brandt. And he described these digital machines as machines that can both create and interpret symbols. And I'm telling you, we use them every day of our lives to automate information work. Symbolic machines allow us to automate routine informational tasks because they can make a range of informational decisions for us and organize information for larger strategic decisions that we still have to do the old-fashioned ways because machines can't do yet. They allow us to automate collecting and analyzing data because they can determine what information is useful as data, and we can tell them how to present it, and they can do that very quickly. Perhaps even more importantly, they allow us to modularize these processes, so-called black boxing them, where we don't even need to know the details of how it works. We don't actually even need to know how to use it effectively anymore. We just need to be able to input enough guidance and a corpus of information for reference for it to produce something, And then we can quickly iterate off of that something to more useful forms. And, by the way, these new digital tools will even teach us, as we are using them, how to use them more effectively. Scary, right? Now my computer is, okay, it's frozen. There we go. The semiotics of interacting with symbolic machines is an entry point to understanding our relationship with AI. We rely on AI more and more to automate the conceptual inputs and outputs of our work and our lives. And so we've kind of grown concerned now that our symbolic machines have crossed what's called the uncanny valley. But in this case, not just the uncanny valley of facial recognition, but actually the creation of meaning. They're becoming too powerful and too human-like, to the point that it takes a specialist, even an expert, with knowledge to differentiate AI-created meaning from human. Previously, we've been able to ignore these machines as they run in the background of our lives. But now, we're worried that AI is poised to do our thinking for us, and maybe even to our exclusion, as it makes increasingly complex decisions in a world that is utterly mediated by digital information. Now, we don't know what the story of AI will be, and anyone who says they do is trying to sell you something, probably an AI tool. But we do know that in the last 18 months, the explosion of AI-driven information services has completely redefined the possibilities, the workflows, and the expectations associated with generating complex and consequential ideas. And I think in every field, AI is forcing people to think about their relationship to knowledge work, and not just the boring or the hard parts. Summarizing several recent studies, the IBM Institute for Business Value just wrote about 2 months ago that AI won't replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't. In the humanities, AI already affects not just the work of producing texts themselves, but also the data that informs that work, and of course, how we source and vet arguments to support our ideas. And this is really only the beginning. The next generation of humanities scholars, including literature scholars, will need to understand how to use automation and AI tools explicitly to streamline and expand the processes of their learning and their work. And they will need to be able to familiarize themselves with new AI research tools like Iris very quickly. I've already seen this in my own professional life, just like you might be seeing it here. The one thing I can tell you about AI is that we cannot ignore its impact. As humanists, I do predict that we will all eventually use AI to organize and optimize aspects of our work in the not too distant future. We will talk about and write about the impact of AI on our discipline. We'll examine AI through its artifacts, formations, history, systems, theories, and other ways of knowing, from the digital humanities to the classics of literature. I do predict that we will eventually use these tools just like we now do Microsoft Word, or more likely today, AI-enhanced Google Docs. And of course, because we're humanists, we're going to really worry about this very extensively because we're good at that. So permit me to worry a little bit, because in my mind, the focus of this talk is not artificial intelligence. And if I'm being completely honest, it's not even the humanities. These are the contexts, and that is crucial for me to lay out, so I did. but the focus of this talk is on you, because you are the humanists. What I hope is that we don't lose in this mad rush to understand and map out a new discipline is the individual. How will AI impact this person? How will it impact you? All of you sitting right there, your mind's wandering, thinking about something else, probably snacks. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. As humanists, but more importantly as individuals, we should consider the digital interfaces we use on a daily basis. AI is already incorporated into their back end as part of the service delivery model. We should keep in mind that interface design is a human process with human thinking and human biases incorporated into every aspect of the creation of these tools and the way we use them. We should already be thinking about the shaping influences of AI on our own minds and our own subjectivity, and how we ourselves compose meaning in the world, because we are already doing that with AI, whether we realize it or not. So permit me, with the time remaining, to introduce two principal challenges that I believe AI places on you, the humanist, and then a couple of approaches to creating meaning that I think will help all of us navigate these challenges with some satisfaction. Fear. People fear change. We fear loss. We really fear losing our autonomy and our agency in our own lives. And for better or worse, AI right now is a focal point of our present collective fear. What will it mean to be a human? What will it mean to be ourselves if we grow dependent on AI to reach each other? Where we are expected to adopt new ways of communicating, of working, perhaps even of thinking. Will the velocity and the momentum of change overwhelm us? Will it consume us? Will we be human? Our fears of the unknown, of the loss of control, is an omnipresent theme in the media coverage of AI. I don't have hard numbers on the analysis of sentiment towards AI, because AI can't provide that yet. But I have seen these articles in my own news feeds daily for months, and this is not from unreputable news organizations. These are global media services publishing these. Now, we have a term for this that you might have heard, and that term is called a moral panic. A moral panic describes a social mechanism by which people in power who feel threatened by potential shifts in social order attempt to dominate something new. Through stoking of moral panics, ideologues protect their hegemony. And they do this by transforming these phenomena into threats and inciting the public to act. It is a process of othering, and it's othering for the purpose of attacking the threat and creating narratives that both devalue and denigrate people associated with it. Let me just wait for my computer to unfreeze. There we go. Now, in the 3rd century before Christ, Plato, the philosopher, he wrestled with the technology of his day, papyrus. It may seem silly at first, but papyrus was the AI of Plato's contemporaries. Papyrus allowed people who could afford access and knew how to use it the ability to dramatically transform how they communicated and how they thought. They could share ideas with other philosophers located in different places than their own body, because papyrus travels, and they could do so in an indeterminate future, because someone can read papyrus at a different point in time than when it was created. Papyrus enabled users of this amazing new technology. Now, we'll call these users writers, right? Because that's what we're talking about, the development of writing in the Western world, to physically organize and curate their knowledge and expand their working memory in ways that transformed interpersonal relationships and generational knowledge, the things that we depend on to maintain civilization. But Plato was cranky, and he was also very skeptical. In Phaedrus, he wrote about the ungodliness of writing. Plato argued that writing would ruin the minds of men who used it. Not women, because women weren't allowed to write, right? Only men in ancient Greece. So, I wish I could tell you that Plato was wrong. He wasn't. We have to keep in mind that Plato's fear was realized. Writing did forever change how meaning was composed and shared, both in the individual and in the polity. Something culturally, can we go to slide 23? Something culturally significant was lost in how knowledge was circulated. Memory no longer served as a vast conceptual repository to be traveled like the halls of a grand palace. Instead, memory became distributed among the mind of the person and the medium, which was papyrus. Much like my own mind, my own working memory is scattered between Post-it notes and annotations in paper books and my phone and Google Drive and Zotero and dozens of open Chrome tabs and a bunch of notebooks and printouts, a host of databases that I keep and use. And each of these are critical because each of them contribute their own individual component to what I am able to recall or use at any given time. Without them, I'm pretty stupid. I shudder to think about what Plato would say. But unlike Plato, I'm not so worried about being corrupted by the written word. And this is because now we know that with the adoption of each new technology that contributes to the shaping of our mind, we see a moral panic of some degree. Papyrus, the printing press, radio, television, the digital calculator was a big one, the personal computer, the smartphone. How many of you have been told that staring at TikTok is going to ruin you? No, come on, you're lying. I know that, yes, okay, one honest person in this entire auditorium. So, all of these information mediating technologies, they've utterly transformed how we live, how we interact, how we communicate, and yes, how we think. Okay. But we must really, let's remain mindful and remain aware that yes, every one of us uses the tools of information technology every day of our lives. We do depend on them. These tools, they only perform within a narrow boundary of predetermined uses. That's good. But, oh, AI, now we have AI and AI makes decisions. When we use AI, we're allowing the symbolic machine to interpret our input, make decisions that are opaque and unknown to us, and produce something that might be wholly unexpected. This is the black box, where our only true interface with this process is our query of it. And that query produces really human results. Until it doesn't, by the way. And then we get even more afraid because we say that the machine is hallucinating. And a hallucinating machine impersonating a human apparently is the scariest thing of all. So we do have to think about Plato and his contemporaries, take that as a lesson, and ask ourselves what this new technology to structure our memory and support our thinking, what does it give us? What does it impart upon us? And what does it take away? Will we be even more of a cyborg than we are now? And I say that because, yes, we are cyborgs with our smartphones nearly wired into our brains through our eyes and our thumbs. At what point does that process lead us to the point where we start thinking ourselves as peons of a larger collective consciousness? Kind of like the Borg of Star Trek. Now, I say not to worry because the humanities of all disciplines gives us the means to address these types of questions. So after fear, the second challenge I would like to discuss is the challenge of influence. Some of us fear AI, but some of us argue its virtues. And when you meet these people, they do so with an almost messianic vigor. I have read and heard claims alike that AI will be an agent of transformation. It will provide us with unlimited productivity, heretofore unimagined opportunities, new forms of expression, new states of being, almost as if it were a miracle. Now, these tendencies towards both fear and towards faith are manifestations of a logical error in causality. One that I'm kind of dangerously close to skirting myself here as I make predictions for you. In the studies of rhetoric, and I'm a rhetorician by training, we refer to this error as technological determinism. Through technological determinism, we attribute to AI a manifest explanatory power of our emotions, our rationalized hopes and fears, rather than attempting to discern through methodical observation the role that AI is playing. If we want to understand the influence of AI on us as individuals through humanistic perspectives, I would really encourage all of you, as students, as perhaps people with an interest in research or planning a career in research, to look empirically at how you or your friends or all of us are connected to these tools. Not just at the level of cultural production and consumption, like watching or making TikToks, which, by the way, I think humanists do particularly well. But the entire network of literate activity we engage in that touches on some aspect of AI use. We should ask what are our points of interaction with specific AI tools in both real and everyday contexts. Now, we have theories and processes that allow us to do that. My own that I used when I did active research was grounded in theory. But all of the empirical ethno-methods of research, of going and actually talking to people and looking at what they do, allow us to construct these kinds of studies. AI tools might even make them more economically feasible for underfunded researchers. I say that because it takes a lot of time to do this, and time is money. By mapping and naming this world of usage and understanding its functional nodes of meaning, and for whom it does mean something, we can generate genuine insight to tell the story of AI in humanistic terms. We will be able to see AI more clearly as what the theorist Bruno Latour calls a mediatory, or an agent capable of transforming, translating, and distorting our own human experience, and not see it in simplistic terms of good or evil. We should take an active and principled and measured approach to understanding the role of AI in the humanities, and more importantly, in the lives of people, our humanists included. We should focus on how we're using AI passively and now actively to compose meaning. While I don't believe in technological determinism, I do see a corollary between our use of AI and the reality that we have to consider that AI, or at least its handlers, gain something very valuable from us as well. I'm reminded of Friedrich Nietzsche's famous line from Beyond Good and Evil. And if thou gaze long into an abyss, the abyss will also gaze into thee. Nietzsche's imagery is really apt here. The concept of neural entrainment explains to us that there is a very strong and direct alignment between brain activity and input stimuli that the brain can interpret rhythmically and symbolically. What neural entrainment tells us is that all of you, if you're still following along with me, and if you understand me, the electrical impulses of your brains are harmonized. The technical term we use is phase locked to the stimulus of my voice. Our brains, yours and mine, are connected through this processing of interpretable acoustic signals. This means that as I'm speaking to you, you are hearing my voice in your head, and you are using that voice to contribute to your own framework of knowledge. That is how we think and learn. Now the implication here, and this is the important part, is that heterogeneity, in other words, the diversity of voices in our lives contribute a great deal to our ability to conceive of new ideas, build diverse and critical perspectives, and more generally, develop a discerning judgment. The opposite is also true. To hear a single voice 24 hours a day is some form of torture, and we know this is true. Soon enough, your brain will begin to accept as truth anything that voice tells you. That is how people are brainwashed. So let me ask you, as we lean on parents, on elders, teachers, and the institutional voices in our lives, we lean on them to guide us in our learning and development of our character. Who will we be if the voices that guide us are no longer human? Those who make these tools, the creators of AI tools, the ones who get to decide how they're used, will have a very deep influence on our own ideological awareness and our economic role in society. Who will these influences be accountable to, if not us? So far, I hope I haven't said anything too radical. Let's review. AI is already shaping how we think and communicate, and will continue to do so, but probably not in the apocalyptic or messianic ways being prophesied in the media. The humanities are a natural place to pay attention to AI's shaping influence on the individual and institution alike. And this is true even though the entire knowledge network and history of the humanities and all of its disciplines is one written with only a vague awareness of the technologies we use to do this work. If you think about it, it's kind of a hermeneutic circle that we have to travel to understand our relationship with technology, because we're stuck using that technology to think about and communicate the ways that we're using it. So, it's a conundrum. What's going to happen if that conundrum is guided by companies and by people who are not principled and thinking about the welfare and interests of the people who are using these tools? It's a symbiotic mechanism through which each of us, we offer ourselves in a Faustian bargain. We sell a piece of ourselves for access to these tools and what they allow us to do. These tools They operationalize our attention, our focus, and our personal information in ways that further strengthen this dynamic of control and commodification. And we trade all of this away for access to this. And that brings me to my last point before I talk about what we can do about it. What does so-called composing meaning for ourselves, which is the title of the talk, look like in a technological world where the control of the tools we use to store our memory and support our cognition are ever more distant from our hands? When you have a pencil in your hands, you own it. You can sharpen it, you can use it, you can break it, you can throw it at someone, you can do whatever you want with it. But your smartphone, it doesn't work that way. There's things called terms of service and regulatory environments that dictate what you are allowed to do with it and how. So, just as a funny aside, this last part of my talk, and it's about creativity, play, storytelling, and something called epistemological pluralism. And that's, by the way, what I actually know about, because that was where all of my practical research was done. But I only get to talk about it briefly because I'm really long-winded. In fact, the first draft of this talk was an unbearable 80 minutes. I was exhausted listening to myself, so I cut it down to like 45. Anyway, these four things I'm going to close with. I do so not only because I researched them. That's not interesting enough. I'm going to talk about them because I use them extensively in my own professional practice as a teacher, as a researcher, as a writer, as a consultant. This is what I do. This is how I develop myself and other people. And by the way, there's only 4 frameworks because I'm really long-winded. I wanted to talk about like 10, so I just chose the 4 most important. But I contend to you that they are essential. When I say composing meaning for ourselves, this is the root of how to do that. And you can do it in any age, with papyrus or with AI. They show us a path towards openness and thinking about and through problems in new ways. Slide. Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? AI has a sense of humor. In the humanities, we must nurture the divergent works of scholars who are willing to take risks, even when failure is the end result. How many of you are poets or writers? Oh, come on, this is a literature and humanities lecture. You're probably not very good, right? Wonderful. Keep doing it. Be different, be divergent, and demand to be supported and recognized for that most important work. We have to support people that take risks. Now, the humanities is interested in works we call creative, but few would actually call the present work of the humanities or literature, the transactional contributions to journals, conferences, books, and so on, as creative work. Because we tend to think of creativity instead as individual creativity in the domain of arts or of poets and fiction writers. I call that creativity with small c. And by the way, I didn't come up with that one either. The person in small c is the source of inspiration, but that's not really broad enough. Often, when we attempt to do small c, we still have to play by the rules, the rigors of tradition, the pernicious demands of career advancement. Small c creativity should be the responsibility of us all because it leads us to really interesting places. It led me to India. Now, I'm a big fan of small C creativity, and individual creativity, I think, carries a lot of merit. But if we're going to develop a mindset towards creativity, and this, I contend to you, is fundamental to the work of humanists. It's actually fundamental to the work of the entire world. We also need to think of Big C. Big C creativity is the process of transforming a symbolic domain by taking an entire field in new directions. And this, by the way, is the work of a lifetime of dedicated and rigorous pursuit. You don't get to Big C by messing around. It's one that if we're not well meant to do, okay, so Big C is something that's hard for us to do in the humanities and in literature because it requires a particular set of conditions and perspectives that really don't mesh well with the direction we're headed in. Big C is not interested in metrics. You might be familiar with something called H indexes and I-10 indexes that measure our impact as scholars, our value, our worth, our employability. These are absolutist frameworks. And field-changing innovation is not interested in absolutist frameworks. It's interested in taking the ideas of people who have significant training and propelling them forward, sometimes in really strange directions that will never be measured in an H or I-10 index. So, we can talk about things like Aristotle's 5 canons of rhetoric, or re-explore the long 17th century of English literature for about the 200th time. But we really can't mistake, we can't afford to mistake our windows into the past for doors into the future. Because we have to walk through those doors. The lessons of the past are not valuable in and of themselves. They have to be met with a discerning eye towards what's to come. And that is when Big C happens. When we understand and have a willingness to embrace tradition and then break away from it. It must be the beginning and not the end itself. As Alfred Korzybski tells us, the map is not the territory. You have to discover the territory. So, play. In Western educational thought, there is a really unhelpful dichotomy. Sorry, my sweaty hand is doing things on the screen. A really unhelpful dichotomy exists between the concept of work and play. What is play? What is work? Why do we play? The concept of play has a lot more complexity and more valences to it than we first think about. But in our context, let's bound it. Let's say play is free movement within a more rigid structure. In other words, the rules. It's not entirely free, but it's also not bound by typically predetermined expectations. Play is able to capture a range of human activities, motivations, experiences, in contrast to what is normatively expected or even allowed. Now, you may notice already that play and creativity go hand in hand. Play is what allows us to approach artifacts of culture and the social formations we create out of them with their specific, static intents and purposes and say, well, that's optional, not required. Play opens up new interpretations to what we might otherwise think we already know for sure. It's a method of heuristic experimentation with the power of letting us explore, identify, even subvert established rules. And you've already noticed, I hope, that this entire presentation is my own very rough attempt at play, of subversion of norms, and probably a failure to demonstrate practically what I'm talking about theoretically. And that's okay. Because meaningful and reflective play is the primary mode of learning for not only children or hobbyists, but anyone like myself for whom their practice depends on experimentation and innovation. If you want to be someone out in the world who experiments and creates new ideas, you have to play. To refer to that as meaningless, to say it's not important enough because it's not work, I reject that. That is a miniature moral panic that someone is creating to try to control and dominate your time and attention. It's an ideological attack on the activity to dismiss its value. Rather than that, let's hold play in high regard, even our failures, because through play we engage the same old thing with new eyes and a spirit for appreciation. My third or fourth thing is storytelling. Like our willingness to play, telling a story is one of our oldest cultural tools. And I can only give you one piece of advice here. It echoes anthropologist Joseph Campbell. Keep telling human stories. Latour, he writes that how we view the organization of our collective lives is not static. It is always in motion. You might think of yourself as a person, but really you're a bunch of people bouncing around in one incredibly dynamic, sometimes chaotic brain. It's always changing at virtually every level. You and I, life, humanity is contradictory and messy, and so are our stories. We use story to bring order and sense to it, just like play. How we organize that chaos in and of our own minds is through storytelling. Through storytelling, we build the conceptual framework of our intuition and our cognition. Without stories, we would have a very hard time differentiating what is important, because it is through narrative that we integrate information into knowledge frameworks. And history has shown us that paradigmatic shifts in technology like AI don't just shape societies at the macro level, they also shape how we engage with, and interpret the consequences of who we are and what we gather around us. It shapes our stories, how we describe ourselves, and our place in the world. And by story, I don't just mean first I did this, and then this happened, I came to India, I gave a talk, a couple of people fell asleep, totally okay, I'm sweating a lot. Yes, that's a story, but it's one type of story. The human mind can parse complex narrative fragments in a way that is responsive to context. Story here is not necessarily traditional or even linear. It's the mutable act of attaching meaning and consequence to action and event. It is referential. It's recursive. It's exploratory. It can even play. And finally, before the briefest of conclusions, I want to mention the concept of epistemological pluralism, because without it, none of these other things can work. In the philosophy of rhetoric, we take this concept very seriously. The idea of epistemological pluralism is that there are multiple valid ways of knowing or perceiving the truth. No method, no discipline, no field, and no domain of knowledge represents the whole aspect of a phenomenon. Epistemological pluralism reminds us that human understanding is incomplete. It is fallible and destined to change as we ourselves grow, both individually and in the collective. Just imagine poor Plato, worried about papyrus, suddenly dropped here in the 21st century, where the average person can't remember what they had for lunch yesterday. That's true, right? It's not just me. Okay. And, by the way, through godless portable super machines, we can access a web of human knowledge so large that no human mind ever will be able to conceive of it in its entirety. Now, finally, sorry, one more. Yes. We've come to the end of my time. Let me close by saying my wish is that all of us continue to stand together. If we do, I believe that the core of promise that is literature, that is poetry, that is art, that is the humanities and humanism will remain an ideological and practical source of vibrancy in the academy and beyond, in all of our lives. So let's use our best tools with our eyes open, including AI. Let us be interested in AI and develop a conceptual wholeness to our understanding of its impact, and keep the person and the individual, keep yourselves and me at the center of this work. Keep your friends, your family, those connections that create and generate all the important things in your lives at the center when you are thinking about using these tools to do the work of the world. And if you do, I believe that we will be able to meet this new destiny with care and promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Corbett, for your illuminating, enriching, and relevant presentation. We start in line today. And now it's time for Q&A session, question and answer session.
Thank you for your words of consolation. I remember reading an article attributed to Noam Chomsky, who being in our departments of literature and languages, and we consider ourselves to be ideologues of the kind, and we listen to him a lot, and we sort of follow him a lot, we quote him a lot. He sort of some scary words to say about AI, but then listening to you was quite a different thing, different experience. As humanists, you tell us we should remain keen to artificial intelligence, and it's a wonderful thing. Of course, we'll say some other things. We have among us a patriarch, Professor Evan Das, another patriarch, Professor Shrivastava, another Professor Dubey, and then I see a creative writer, Professor Neelam Sarankaur, and a wonderful, friendly former chairperson, Professor Sanjoy. So this is a Q&A session, and there are a number of scholars sitting there, and I think you must ask questions, but I would ask these senior people to ask their questions first, because yes, so that is what I was sort of imagining. Professor Neelam Sarankaur has a question to ask, and she's a creative writer. She's a creative writer, and the question comes from a creative writer. And Professor Corbett, you were talking about big C and small C.
It does speak to me because these are questions that I have been countenancing recently. In fact, I have been playing a lot, playing the full sense of the word play with ChatGPT, telling it to explain Advait philosophy in heroic couplets, which it did beautifully, or Einstein's relativity in a haiku, things like that. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom because, well, I'm conservative, and given my age, I have the apprehensions which most people have, and also being an organic writer, as in organic vegetable. So working out of my own biological and psychological intoxication or pollution or infection, but somehow retraining ourselves from any of these things. Now, I fear that a time may come when there may be such a congestion of meaning that our personal meanings and the organic, old-fashioned way might get confounded. Do you have any words of comfort to give somebody who nurses these apprehensions?
I'll tell you first that Plato would absolutely agree with you. And in fact, I think in my own life, the older I get, the more concerned I grow about my own place and the place of my contemporaries and my children in the world. And it is wrestling with these same questions and issues that you have that I've come to this position. And the position is one of hope. Not hope for AI. I think that is a material reality that we're facing, but hope for ourselves. And, expressing that by contextualizing the struggle in a meaningful way for people. Last night at dinner, I said I came to provoke just a little bit, to argue both sides enough to produce a spirited discussion, to get people talking and sharing what they're thinking and feeling about it, because that is the necessary work. I mean, when we write a haiku, when we do something different outside of the norm, we're doing it because we feel something different. And I do think there's a possibility of it going either way. The Borg of Star Trek, where a person is a mindless functionary for a larger collective that is controlled somewhere else. I mean, there's a reason I mentioned that. But on the same token, if we look at all of the cataclysmic technologies that have, some of them really rended society, for example, the printing press. The printing press tore Europe apart. It essentially broke sovereign, the link between sovereignty and divinity in Europe, which was an absolute cataclysm for monarchical power. But if each of us are able to come to a position in ourselves, whether it is for or against, if it's well considered and we share that with each other, and we're able to advance our own understanding of where we are, that is the success I'm looking for. So just by virtue of you sharing that, I feel like I've done my job.
Thank you. That was it. We have more questions from our very, very senior people here. Next goes to Professor Dubey. Next question. He will ask a question. No question is going to happen.
About the viability of machines and tools in reducing language, in reducing composing meaning, making meaning. Meaning has been a real problem in my understanding. Luckily, you didn't divorce it from the realm of humanism and humanity. And that is why I am prompted to ask you just a very simple thing, simple question related to meaning. Myself being practicing poet, sometimes I am stuck up with the problem of expression. Interesting meaning. Because in the realm of poetry, meaning is sometimes deluding. doesn't come as you want to express. I give examples on earth. You have your own voices, Sylvia Plath, and you must have read her one daddy. The expression which I have is, of course, a deep attachment to her father is so clear in the poem. But if you come to deduce the meaning of chew, 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 I mean, I think you will be struggling at the arriving at the meaning of this expression. Chew, chew, chew. In another example, taken from the waistline of these. You have many times he makes expressions of such words or combination of words where arriving at the meaning becomes present. Others comes. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Jack, 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 jack. The other line in the text itself, in the text of the poem. Go, Rico, go, Rico, go, Rico, etc., etc. There are so many. I'm sure, and the feeling is profound. You fail to express yourself in words. You have to transcend the barriers of language, especially in the field of poetry. I'm not talking about your playwriting or storytelling. I'm talking about poetry. The area in which I claim to specialize in my study. So, I put the question to you. Would you please explain to me how to catch up in the artificial intelligence, the poetic language, and how to arrive at the meaning, proper meaning?
And the first 10 minutes of my talk that I cut out was an explanation or a description of how we create meaning conceptually from nothing through knowledge. We know that AI can write poetry. If we think of poetry as a form, in other words, AI can interpret an existing form, do some magic to it of some sort, and another form that resembles the first or changes it according to some rules that exist. But the real question I see in my own eyes, it becomes philosophical. Is it poetry simply because it looks like poetry? What is the role of poetry in our lives and in our society? I say that creating meaning is as simple as you have expressed. Choo, choo, choo. Very meaningful. That meaning is ambiguous. It can change. It's historical. We're still talking about it 100+ years later. But that meaning is subjective and it lies within each of us. It's in our heart. It's in our soul. The road from meaning to knowledge is different. It's a long and arduous one that involves a community of peers or neighbors. It's not knowledge until it's accepted by, embraced, and used by someone other than ourselves. So, can AI produce meaning? For me, sure, I read it and I'm interested, maybe I'm not, but it means something. Is it meaning for AI itself? No one is prepared to answer that. And I don't believe that we will be for several decades at least to come. I believe, if we're talking about belief, I'll put it out there since someone's going to ask. I believe general artificial intelligence, in other words, subjectivity in AI that can think for itself, maybe even feel, the journey to that is the same as the journey to fusion. It's always going to be 15 years away for the foreseeable future. But I'm not so sure that AI can create knowledge. Sure, we can use AI in our own knowledge work, but for knowledge to be knowledge, it has to be embraced as knowledge. And in my mind, AI is still a tool. It's a very, very advanced pencil. I just hope we're not the papyrus, right?
Thank you, Dr. Corbett. Of course, it is a must. We have a question from Professor Sanjoy Datta. We were talking about T.S. Eliot and the wasteland, but some lines from choruses from the rock came to my mind when you were speaking. Where is the wisdom that we lost in knowledge? And where is the knowledge that we lost in information? Right? I think artificial intelligence deals a lot with concepts, ideas, and information. But when we are thinking of wisdom and knowledge, we are talking about experience, life itself, and what the way in which we negotiate our experiences in life in attaining wisdom. Do you feel that artificial intelligence can ever do this?
Well, I feel like you've already answered the best part of the question with your own, perspective. And as you were talking about that, another set of T.S. Eliot lines came to mind. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. But I am skeptical I'll just put it out there. No, I don't. I simply do not. But what I see, and this is simply, casting our ideas to the wind because none of us really know. But I see the process of augmentation as an ongoing thing. The stylus, the ability to scratch meaning into a substrate, a rock or a piece of papyrus or paper, that is an augmentation. It is a technology, a tool that we created to enhance our own ability to be human. And I see artificial intelligence as very similar to that, a much more complicated version. The question I would pose back to anyone, and I would do so because I don't think they can answer it either, is at what point do we lose sense of it being a tool and just accept it as part of ourselves?
Thank you, Dr. Corbett. I know that there are plentiful more questions from scholars and other faculty members too, but my chairperson of the department has an intervention to make and something to ask and make a comment on whatever he has to. So, please. Will you speak from here or there?
Less of a comment, but I think on this almost going to be 1 million. All these talk of human intelligence, artificial versus artificial intelligence, is a creation of the human mind. And when we talk about the greatness of artificial intelligence, it is always with reference to some human mind. It is only a handful of human beings who have made the greatest of inventions, and they will continue. It is the people never for ordinary mortals, it shall never be for ordinary mortals. And if it is man versus the machine, I think human beings will continue outstrip the machine unless there is some catastrophe or some type of catastrophe. It can never be like that. You never know what science can do. It can even destroy the body. It should be, I think, by an experiment. As far as writing poems, interpreting poems, etc. is concerned, or making paintings, I think what is perhaps more important is the kind of impact they would have on us and for how long. Whether these poems or paintings would be considered great, let us say 50 years from now or not, would bother. Many of these computer productions have been dismissed. They had a very short entertainment for entertainment. As far as my students are concerned, they are concerned with artificial intelligence as far as it is going to help them write their answers in the examination or whether artificial intelligence to do the writing part also, the examination also, and hence them get more degrees. Artificial intelligence is not something to be scared of, it is something to be welcomed. We may need to do that. We are human beings with all our shortcomings. And I think the impact which it shall have on our mind, emotions, etc. is the thing to watch out. Already the mobile phone, the computer has started playing havoc with us. Whether we are aware or not, but it does begin somewhere on our minds and lives. So it is with this note of caution that I like to finish. And I must hand over to Dr. Patrick Corbett, with whom I spent last evening also for a very nice and very enlightening lecture. And I am sure he has given us food for thought. And all of us are supposed, artificial intelligence is inescapable. You cannot run away from it. That is it. So he has helped us think and probably will think better with his head and more.
The interesting thing about his intervention is that he sort of answered his own intervention. Thank you, sir. And I know there are scholars here wanting to ask questions, but we are running very, very short time. So I'm handing it over back to sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Prakash Joshi and Dr. Corbett, for this fascinating session. Now, I would request our head of the Department of English and Modern European Languages, Professor Saxena, to felicitate and honor our guests with shawl and garland.